All right, let's jump into the examples and look at some strategies that we can use to write more concisely. I'm going to go over 8 strategies, but they fall into 2 overall themes. I wanted to group them like this because I think it's going to be easier to remember. So improving your verb usage and streamlining your approach in general. Let's start out with some of the ideas about verb usage. Most of the ideas are going to overlap a little bit, and that's a good thing because it's going to make it easier to remember the approach. But I'll talk a little bit about 3 ideas of avoiding phrasal verbs, weak verbs, and nominalizations. Now, as we do this, we're not only going to be more concise, but also, in many cases, being more concise will also require you to be more accurate and precise, which, as a result, will be clearer, easier to read, and sound more professional all at the same time. So we're getting a lot of benefit here by forcing ourselves to do something that we should be doing anyway. So let's look at our first strategy, and this is something that I mentioned in some of your paragraphs from Fall 1, but I really want to emphasize it and show some examples because it's so important and it's so easy. We can all count to 1. So if your verb, in any case, consists of more than 1 word, for example, here's 1, to put up with something. We have 3 words that give 1 idea. If you're in that situation, you want to stop and see if you can find a 1-word verb that gives the same idea. In this case, we could say tolerate, or perhaps we could find something else. And the idea is just that, okay, mathematically speaking, we saved a couple words. In some cases, it's 1 word. In some cases, it's more. It's also a little bit more direct. It sounds a little more professional. And chances are, if we sit down and think of 2 or 3 options, we'll be able to choose one that's perfect for the situation that we want. So we're also being a little more precise. You get a lot of benefits from a change that's pretty easy to make and that's easy to remember. We don't have to think about any grammar. We don't have to think about anything complicated. We just need to pick 1-word verbs. So this is very important, and probably the 1-word verb is going to be the best choice 99% of the time. Once in a while, it's hard to think of a better option, so you have to use one. But for the most part, you can do it, and you should. And when you pick your verb, just try to pick the best one. You can pick a simple verb. It's okay. I'm not saying you have to go to the thesaurus and pick some obscure verb. You probably sound pompous, and your reader might have to look it up in the dictionary, which is most readers aren't going to do. So you don't want to turn your readers off. You just want to take a very simple but also professional approach. Let's take a look at a couple more examples. Come up against. If you want to try to stop and think of a 1-word verb that could say the same thing here. Okay, face, or pretend if the grammatical structure was a little bit different of the sentence, it might also be confront, depending on how that happens. Here's another one, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words long. So to talk about the benefits of something. So can you think of a 1-word verb that means the same as talking about the benefits of something? Okay, well, there's probably a few. We could think of maybe praise, support, champion, or the one that I like best here I think would probably work would be tout. And this is a bit of an extreme example, but I think that it's a good one that shows how we don't need all of these words. And it also shows that if you had a choice between 4 or 5 options, you would want to pick the one that's best for the context. So again, we're being more concise, more precise, clear, easier to read, and more professional all at once because we just did the very simple task of picking a 1-word verb. There's really no reason not to do it, and there's every reason to do it. So from now forward, use 1-word verbs as much as possible. Let's look at the next strategy. You'll notice some overlap here, but there's some specific points that might help you remember in the future what you're dealing with. So we have something called weak verbs that we want to avoid, and weak verbs are just verbs that require other words to explain the main action or the main meaning that's going on with the verb. So a lot of these little simple ones are often considered weak verbs, especially to be and to have. Also do, make, take, give, get, and some other ones. Sometimes we can use these verbs. That's okay. But if you notice a situation, like let's take a look at an example here. Tom Cruise is one of the actors in Mission Impossible. Forgot my period there. This is a sentence it looks fine on its face, but we do have a weak verb here. We have to be. So anytime you use is, am, or are, or have or has, you just want to stop and check, see if you're using too many words here. So can you think of a verb that means to be an actor in something? To be an actor in a movie or a show? And as it turns out, we do have a couple verbs about that, and one is it could just be stars. Tom Cruise stars in Mission Impossible. So we saved a few words here. It's a little more interesting. The weak verbs, in addition to being a little bit wordy, they're not quite as vivid or interesting. So we achieve, yet again, something more in addition to everything that I just listed on the previous slide. Another benefit is they just tend to be more interesting, the one-word verbs. Another example, managers should give ideas about how to do the job. Again, we have some choices. We could say explain, teach, mentor, guide, all sorts of possibilities, even demonstrate. So explain would be more for a verbal explanation, demonstrate would be more of a behavioral, physical explanation. And I think that, again, this shows that we're not only being more concise, but we're being more precise at the same time. We're forcing ourselves to do a lot of good things at once. And you'll also notice that these weak verbs are made up of multiple words. So it fits in this umbrella idea of picking one-word verbs. So even if you can't remember this idea about weak verbs, just remember the one-word verb idea and you'll also avoid this problem. Okay, strategy 3 is to avoid something called nominalizations, a hard word to say, a hard word to remember. Nominalization is just the noun form of a verb. So overall what I'm trying to say is try to favor verbs over nouns when possible, when you have the choice. For example, instead of make a recommendation, you can just say recommend. Or draw a conclusion, you can often say conclude. Unless you want to emphasize, how you came to the conclusion or something, then it might make sense to come to a conclusion or draw a conclusion. That's fine. Remember, if something's natural, or I don't want you to force something just for the sake of being concise. Of course, you want to be clear and sound natural. But in most cases, we can shorten these. For example, give some guidance. You can just say guide. Or again, we might say mentor or teach or instruct or whatever the best choice is. Another example is do a trade. This also happens to be a weak verb. And again, all of these are multiple word verbs. We can just say trade. You'll notice that the solution, or at least one solution, is usually present in these nominalizations because we have the noun form and we can just switch it to the verb form. So nice and easy. And again, all of these fall in the umbrella of using one-word verbs. So that's it for our verb usage.